Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science corner of your night, where we take the strangest questions humans have ever muttered under starlit skies and stretch them into a kind of lullaby. Tonight, you're drifting into the puzzle of expansion, the way the universe insists on getting bigger, even when, supposedly, there's nothing outside for it to spill into. You picture it like pouring tea into a cup, but then realise there's no cup, no table, no kitchen, not even a clumsy hand pouring. Just tea somehow, swelling into more tea. You probably won't survive this question if you keep trying to draw diagrams, but don't worry. The point isn't to solve it, it's to let it unravel you in the softest possible way. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love if you dropped your location and local time in the comments, because there's something comforting about knowing we're all staring at the same expanding sky from different corners of this very round Earth. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin by closing your eyes and imagining yourself suspended in the middle of a quiet field at night. The air is cool, the grass beneath you damp, and above you an infinite dome of stars is smeared across the dark. You trace constellations lazily, Orion leaning one way, Cassiopeia lounging the other, and you let your mind wander. Every star feels like a pinprick window into some further distance. But then you remember, those lights aren't windows, they're lighthouses shining from within the same ocean you're already floating in. And that ocean space itself is stretching, not into a greater ocean, but somehow into itself. Like bread dough rising with raisins inside, except without a kitchen counter to catch the overflow. You chuckle a little, because no matter how you compare it, the metaphor eventually collapses on itself, just like that lumpy sourdough you once forgot in the oven. Historically, people weren't very comfortable with the idea of expansion at all. In fact, less than 100 years ago, most astronomers assumed the universe was static and eternal, the ultimate meh, nothing to see here, of cosmology. It wasn't until Edwin Hubble, in the 20s, noticed galaxies running away from us, redshifts stretching their light, that the picture shifted. Suddenly, the universe wasn't a fixed ceiling of stars, but a restless, inflating space where everything was in motion, the quirky tidbit. When Hubble first presented his data, a lot of physicists actually resisted, partly because they didn't want to deal with the implications of a beginning. If the universe was expanding, it must once have been smaller. And if it was smaller, did that mean there was an actual birth moment? Historians still argue whether Hubble himself fully grasped what his redshifts implied, or whether later thinkers retrofitted him into the role of discoverer of expansion. You lie there, picturing this great cosmic swelling up, and your mind starts to itch with the question, expanding into what? You stretch your arms out like a starfish and try to imagine an edge where you could press your palm against the curtain of existence. Would it feel like silk? Would it be hot? Would you hear a faint buzz, like the hum of your neighbour's refrigerator at 3 a.m? But the more you lean toward this imaginary edge, the more you realise that the question itself might be flawed. Asking what's outside the universe is like asking what's north of the North Pole. A funny thought, because technically the North Pole is already as north as you can get. Step any direction, and you're just heading south. Still, human brains are stubborn. You want walls, containers, neat boundaries. It's the same instinct that once had sailors drawing sea monsters at the margins of their maps. When the known runs out, we doodle dragons or turtles to soothe the void. You roll onto your side in the grass and grin, because if medieval cartographers had known about cosmic expansion, they probably would have inked "Here be bigger universes" in curly script. The idea of nothingness has always unnerved people. Aristotle, way back in ancient Greece, argued against the very possibility of a vacuum. To him, nothing wasn't a thing you could have, it was just the absence of something and therefore meaningless, which ironically is close to how some modern physicists talk about space expanding without an outside. The word nothing itself carries trouble. You whisper it slowly, drawing out the syllables, no thing. But if nothing is truly no thing, how can you picture it? Your brain sneaks in some kind of black fog or an empty white room, or maybe a void with faint elevator music in the distance. But those are still things. Colours, sensations, atmospheres. Pure nothing doesn't let you have even that. It doesn't let you float or breathe or hum nervously. It's not even a blank canvas, because a canvas has weight, texture, possibility. Real nothing wouldn't support your dreams or even the idea of dreams, which is why maybe the universe doesn't expand into nothing, it just expands. Period. The sentence doesn't need a second half, yet lying there, you still sneak a peek at the stars and feel the tug of your imagination. You can't help it. You picture space like a giant loaf of raisin-bread swelling in the oven of time. You picture yourself as a tiny raisin, riding the dough upward, scooting away from every other raisin as the bread swells. But here's the kicker. The bread isn't rising into a bigger kitchen. The bread is the kitchen. The oven is an illusion, which might explain why your real oven burns pizza rolls but somehow never contains the universe. A chill breeze cuts through the field and you pull your jacket tighter. You think of how ancient stargazers in Mesopotamia or China would have stared at these same skies, noticing slow motions of planets and weaving them into stories. They had no telescopes, no redshifts, no Hubble diagrams, just naked eyes and a stubborn hunger for order. Many thought of the sky as a dome, a hard shell with lamps embedded. Some myths even placed water beyond the dome, as if the universe were a snow globe waiting to crack. And in a way, those myths make more emotional sense than modern physics does. At least a snow globe has an outside, a desk to sit on, a hand to shake it. Expansion into itself feels like a cheat code you're not supposed to understand. You yawn, because your head is getting heavy under the weight of too many metaphors. Still, you keep circling back to that tricky sentence. If nothing exists beyond the universe, what is it expanding to? The best scientists can offer is, it isn't expanding into anything. It's just that the distances between things are growing, like the notes of a lullaby stretching into a softer rhythm, never needing a stage to play upon. You smile because whether you get it or not, the stars above are already in on the secret. You're still lying there in the grass, head tilted back to that star-flooded sky, but the scene begins to flicker. The stars blur, melt into streaks, and then collapse into an impossible rewind, carrying you back to a moment when there were no stars at all. The night around you grows warmer, then hot, then searing. You're not really in danger, it's just your imagination doing the heavy lifting, but suddenly you're hovering in the very first fraction of a second after the birth of everything. You've arrived in the age of cosmic inflation, that mind-bending moment when the universe ballooned faster than light itself, a trillion times in less than a blink. Your blanket of grass is gone, your pillow of earth is gone too. There's only this jittery, foamy sea of possibility, and you floating like a confused tourist who forgot to bring snacks. The thing about inflation is that it's fast in ways language can't quite catch. You could say it expanded faster than light, and that's true, but it's not like galaxies were breaking speed limits with little sirens chasing them. Instead, the space between everything was stretching so ferociously that light itself couldn't keep up. It's the difference between running down a hallway and having the hallway lengthen faster than your sneakers can slap the floor. And here's a mainstream historical fact to ground you. In 1980, physicist Alan Guth proposed this inflationary model to solve some nagging puzzles, like why the universe looks so smooth and uniform on the larger scales. Quirky tidbit. Guth originally scribbled the idea in a notebook late at night, fueled not by cosmic grandeur, but by the usual grad student cocktail of coffee, stress, and probably the suspicion that his landlord was charging too much rent. Historians still argue whether inflation is the only, or even the best, way to explain that smoothness, or whether there's some alternative story waiting in the wings. As you float through this inflationary froth, you realise the words you're using, space, time, stretch, are already betraying you. You're not inside a room that's enlarging, you're inside something that doesn't yet have furniture, walls, or even the idea of a wall, and yet bizarrely you're cosy. Expansion isn't loud or violent here, it's more like watching bread dough swell, except the dough is hotter than a million suns and also keeps insisting it's empty. You laugh softly, because if this were a cooking show, no one would subscribe. Today on Cosmic Baking, we'll be whipping up a nice hot space-time, served fresh at 10 trillion degrees. Still, you try to pin down an image. You picture yourself as a tiny spark, one among countless quantum jitters in the vacuum, suddenly stretched across gulfs larger than a galaxy. You're smeared like butter across toast that's much too big. The field you're lying on is gone, but you can almost sense it being written into existence, atom by atom, law by law. Inflation didn't just blow up the size of the universe, it also ironed out the wrinkles smoothing everything so galaxies could eventually form in a kind of cosmic origami. Without this weird over-caffeinated moment, the universe might have stayed a lumpy, inhospitable mess. You pause to take in the contradiction. Inflation is supposed to happen everywhere at once, so there's no outside to it. Yet it feels impossible not to ask, what did it inflate into? Your brain defaults back to balloons, or maybe a soap bubble. You picture a bubble swelling in a sink full of dishes, wobbling, threatening to pop, but remember what you learned in the last section. The bubble doesn't need air out it. It only needs the laws of physics inside it. It's self-contained, a magician pulling itself up by its own shoelaces, which frankly is about as logical as a cat paying its own rent. Some theories go even further and suggest inflation never really stops. Instead, it could spawn endless pocket universes, like champagne bubbles fizzing forever. Yours happened to cool just right, slowing down enough to form galaxies, stars, and late-night YouTube rabbit holes. But elsewhere, other universes might still be inflating, forever unreachable. You grin at the thought, because if that's true, somewhere out there might be a version of you watching a video titled, "If the universe isn't expanding, why is my couch?" And yet, even as these wild possibilities swirl, there's a deep quiet at the heart of it. Expansion doesn't roar, it whispers. It whispers in background radiation that astronomers detected in '65, a faint cosmic afterglow that still hums across the sky today. You can almost hear it now, like the white noise of your fan except stretched across the entire universe. That radiation is the echo of inflation's fireworks, softened into lullaby tones. You curl into it, because even though your mind is juggling impossible scales, your body responds like it always does to background hum, it relaxes. One more oddity before you drift too deep. Not everyone buys inflation. Some cosmologists argue it creates more puzzles than it solves, especially since its details are slippery to test. Historians still argue whether inflation will one day be replaced by some entirely new framework, something we can't even imagine yet. For now, though, it remains the best story we've got for why the universe is both enormous and eerily uniform, like a blanket that was ironed flat before anyone tucked themselves in. So here you are, lying not on grass anymore, but on the invisible mattress of space-time itself, feeling it puff beneath you like bread in an oven that never ends. You're a tiny raisin again. Except this time you're not just drifting apart from your neighbours, you're part of the recipe baked right into the infinite loaf. There's no edge, no oven walls, no countertop, there's only the rise, steady and inexorable, carrying you along with it. And as you finally exhale, you realise you don't need to ask what it's expanding into. You only need to feel the stretch, like a sigh that never quite finishes. You're still floating in that soft, rising loaf of space-time, but the pace slows, the fizzes of inflation quieting down, and you're left with the calmer rhythm of a universe that has settled into a long exhale. Now it isn't expanding faster than your thoughts can catch. It's stretching at a tempo you can almost hum to. And this is where the distinction really matters. When astronomers say the universe is expanding, they don't mean galaxies are rocketing through some vast dark ocean like bumper cars gone rogue. They mean the fabric between galaxies itself is stretching like elastic dough being pulled, or like that one pair of sweatpants that somehow survives every laundry day, growing thinner but never tearing. It's tricky, because your instinct keeps whispering, but if galaxies are moving apart, they must be moving through something. That's what centuries of watching ships sail through seas or birds slice through air has trained your brain to believe. But the cosmos isn't an ocean in that way. Imagine drawing dots on a rubber band and then tugging the ends apart. The dots don't swim through the band, they're just carried by its stretch. That's galaxies for you. They're not tearing through void like cosmic athletes. They're raisins in the bread, passengers on a train that doesn't need tracks. Here's a sober historical fact. It was Belgian priest and physicist Georges Lemaitre who first suggested in 1927 that the universe was expanding before Hubble even published his famous data. He called it the hypothesis of the primeval atom. At first, people laughed it off, or worse, dismissed it as a sneaky way to sneak religion into science, the quirky tidbit. Einstein himself initially rejected Lemaitre's work, famously telling him, "Your calculations are correct, but your physics is abominable." Later, Einstein ate his words and praised him publicly, proof that even geniuses occasionally leave their humility in another coat pocket. Historians still argue whether Einstein's dismissal was pure scientific skepticism or tinted by his personal discomfort with the idea of a universe that had a beginning. So you watch as galaxies drift apart, not as little ships sailing away, but as lanterns pinned to a stretching fabric. Some galaxies, the really nearby ones like Andromeda, still tug toward us because of the local gravity. They're the outliers, rebels refusing to ride the conveyor belt. But most galaxies, they're faithful raisins, and the farther away they are, the faster they recede, not because they're speeding up, but because the taffy between us is being pulled more and more. It's such a bizarre setup that astronomers call it Hubble's law, as though a law makes it sound less like magic and more like a proper equation you can scribble on a napkin. The image that comes to you now is of sitting on an inflatable mattress while it's being filled with air. You don't feel yourself zooming to the left or the right, but suddenly the person on the far corner seems farther away, and if the mattress keeps inflating, they'll drift further still, even though neither of you ever moved. The universe is the ultimate air pump, except there's no hose, no compressor, and apparently no warranty. You smirk a little, because if you had to call customer service to ask about space-time stretching, they'd probably put you on hold forever. Your mind drifts toward the stars you can see with the naked eye. They look steady, fixed in their constellations, but in reality they're racing, all of them caught up in this slow unfurling. The catch is that expansion works on the vastest scales. Locally, gravity keeps things knitted together. That's why your body doesn't stretch like silly putty during cosmic expansion. Atoms and molecules cling too tightly. Your room doesn't expand, nor your city, nor even your galaxy. Expansion is the stage, not the actors. The drama happens in the gulfs between clusters, in the abyss where gravity doesn't hold a leash. You roll onto your side, still in that field in your mind, and you imagine watching the stars drift farther and farther apart as centuries tick by. There's a melancholic sweetness to it, like friends at a party slowly heading home, leaving the room emptier by the hour. Except in this party, the host keeps building more room as people leave, just to make sure you never bump into each other again. Expansion is generous, but it's also a little lonely. There's an unsettling joke hidden here. The more the universe expands, the less of it we'll ever see. Light from distant galaxies will be stretched so much it will fade into invisibility, leaving future skywatchers in a universe that looks emptier than it really is. Historians still argue whether that eventual loneliness means we live in a cosmically privileged moment, able to glimpse the richness of galaxies before they vanish beyond reach. You can't help but laugh softly. It's as if the cosmos invited us to a single showing of its grand performance, and in a few billion years the curtain will drop and no encore will be possible. Yet for now, you lie back and admire how expansion isn't chaos, but choreography. Galaxies glide apart in predictable rhythm, a cosmic waltz that obeys mathematics as strict as any sheet music. And even if you don't know all the notes, you can hear the melody. A slow swell, a widening hush, the soft hum of distance stretching without end. Expansion doesn't need a destination. It doesn't need an into. It simply is, like your own breathing, expanding and contracting without asking permission. You take one more breath of night air, the field around you steady again, the stars above still twinkling, though now you know they're all partners in the same invisible dance. The space between them grows, not into anything, but into itself. And somehow, in the middle of that paradox, you feel anchored, as though being carried by something vast and patient. The thought of galaxies as lanterns drifting apart on an invisible sheet stays with you. But soon another picture forms, something more playful. You imagine yourself as a tiny ant, padding along the curved surface of a balloon. Around you, other ants shuffle, some carrying crumbs, others just wandering, antennae twitching. None of you see the whole balloon, of course. From your perspective, the surface feels endless, smooth, and strangely flat. You walk forward, and the ground keeps unfolding beneath your feet, no edge in sight. Then the balloon begins to inflate, stretching wider and wider. The ants aren't running from each other, yet every crumb carrier notices the others drifting farther apart. You sigh, because this ballooner analogies is the one every science explainer trots out, and while it's useful, it's also misleading. After all, real balloons sit in air, in rooms, in worlds. They have insides and outsides, but the universe, inconveniently, has no outside. You keep walking as an ant, and you realize how hard it is to stop sneaking an outside into your imagination. You keep picturing air around the balloon, maybe even a giant hand holding the string. That's because your brain loves containers. From boxes of cereal to closets of laundry, from aquariums to stadiums, you've been trained to think of things as living inside other things. The quirky tidbit is that early 20th century writers sometimes mocked Einstein's curved space ideas by asking, what is it curved into? As if space were a trampoline that had to sag into some greater basement. Historians still argue whether Einstein himself ever fully liked the balloon metaphor. He used it reluctantly, knowing it confused as much as it clarified. But still, the balloon has its charms. You picture the surface swelling, the ants separating. None of them can find an edge no matter how far they march. That's the important part. The expansion doesn't need an outside. The surface is all there is. And here's a neat trick. You, as the ant, live in 2 dimensions. You can't look up and see the balloon's 3-dimensional roundness. All you know is your 2-dimensional horizon endlessly curving. So when you imagine our universe as the 3-dimensional surface of some higher dimensional balloon, maybe you're the ant again, unable to perceive the bigger picture. Maybe there's a cosmic string being held somewhere, but you'll never glimpse the hand. You flop back into your human self, lying once more on your grassy field. The balloon fades, but the sensation lingers that stretching doesn't require an into. The surface grows on its own terms, but you can't help one more joke. You picture yourself blowing up a balloon, the latex squeaking, your cheeks puffing out like a cartoon. Then you let go and it rockets wildly around the room, spraying spit. For a second you wonder, what if universes do that too? Inflate, wobble, then sputter away with a hiss? Probably not, but you chuckle anyway. The cosmos might be majestic, but metaphors make it delightfully silly. Of course, not all analogies are equal. Some people prefer raisin-bread over balloons. The raisins stay still while the dough swells between them. Others talk about rubber sheets, or soap bubbles, or even stretchy chewing gum. Each image catches one truth and drops another. That's the thing about cosmic teaching tools. They're like parables, more about vibe than literal accuracy. And it's worth remembering that the universe doesn't owe us metaphors. It just does its expanding thing, indifferent to whether we picture balloons, bread, or gum stuck to a shoe. Still, you wander further in your thoughts. What if you, ant-like, could keep walking forever? On the balloon's surface, you'd never find a boundary. You'd circle back eventually, arriving at your starting point without ever noticing a wall. That's one possibility for our cosmos too, finite yet unbounded. Like how Earth is finite, but you can keep walking its surface without an edge to trip over. It's a soothing thought, like realizing your favorite playlist is on loop. You never run out, you just cycle through again. But then you remember, we don't actually know if our universe works that way. Maybe it's infinite, maybe it's finite. Historians still argue whether the data from cosmic background radiation favors one geometry over the other. A cricket chirps nearby in your imaginary field, grounding you again. You smile at the thought that ancient stargazers never had to juggle balloons or bread metaphors. For them, the sky was a literal dome. You might tease those old cosmologies for being quaint, but at least domes come with edges. Edges make sense to tired brains, expansion into nothingness. That's the stuff of insomnia. You let yourself drift, imagining galaxies as ants, yourself as an ant, the balloon swelling. The more it stretches, the less sense it makes to ask, into what? The ants don't need an answer, and maybe you don't either. The surface grows because that's what it does. And as you surrender to that, the thought becomes less a puzzle and more a lullaby. Not a problem to solve, but a rhythm to hum yourself to sleep with. The balloon fades from your imagination, but the itch of the question lingers. If space is expanding, is there an edge out there somewhere? A final curtain you could stumble into? You stretch your hand toward the stars as though you could feel around for seams, like finding the edge of wallpaper in a dark room. Nothing. Just air. Just sky. Just the endless impression of more. It's unnerving, because almost everything else in life has a boundary. Coffee mugs have rims, beaches meet oceans, even your phone has a screen you can smudge but not go beyond. Surely the universe must have one too. Surely there's a cosmic fence post hammered somewhere into the soil of nothingness. And yet, astronomers insist there isn't. They say you can travel in any direction forever and never hit a wall. No cosmic construction ahead sign, no out of bounds warning like in a video game. That absence feels suspicious, almost like a cover-up. You laugh to yourself imagining space as an open-world map where you just keep walking, except instead of bumping into invisible boundaries, the map keeps generating more terrain under your feet. It's the ultimate game, but with no level designer and no end credits. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Even as late as the 19th century, many scientists believed in a finite static universe, a celestial vault with stars glued to it. The quirky tidbit? Some medieval manuscripts included diagrams of the edge, with angels perched outside humming away as they spun the firmament like a giant record. Historians still argue whether those drawings were meant literally or symbolically, but either way they reveal how deep the human craving for an edge goes. The universe without one feels slippery, like a riddle with no punchline. You imagine walking across your grassy field deciding to test it. You walk east past the trees, past the horizon, past the curve of Earth. You keep walking, years pass. Your shoes disintegrate, your bones tire, but you never find a boundary. Instead, the landscape keeps refreshing like an endless screensaver. You pause and sigh, because the truth hits. An expanding universe doesn't need edges. It's not blowing up inside a box. It's more like the book itself is stretching, and you're sealed inside forever. Still, edges haunt you. They sneak into myths. Think of the Norse belief in Ymir's body becoming the walls of the world, or the ancient Babylonians picturing a dome of bronze. Boundaries give comfort, because they say this is the space you occupy, and beyond it, something else holds the chaos at bay. But the modern universe laughs at that comfort. Expansion means the edges aren't there. Or worse, if they are, they're so far beyond our observable bubble that no light will ever bring them into view. You're a goldfish in a bowl, convinced the glass isn't real because your eyes can't reach it. There's a playful horror in imagining an edge, though. What if you really could walk far enough to touch it? You press your palm against the boundary, expecting stone or fire, and instead, it feels blank. Like nothing at all. No texture, no resistance, no there. The kind of nothing that doesn't even let you say the word nothing. You'd recoil, because touching true emptiness is like touching silence so pure it deafens. And maybe that's why the universe spares you. Better to keep you swimming in an infinite pool than let you scrape against whatever doesn't exist beyond it. Back in your grassy field, the stars seem to tremble, not with answers, but with indifference. They don't care about edges. They burn, they glow, they drift further apart. You realize the edge you crave isn't theirs to provide. It's a human need, born of boxes and walls and doorways. Out here, in cosmic scales, edges dissolve. Expansion doesn't press against a border, it unfolds itself like a song that never runs out of verses. You chuckle softly, because if there were an edge, someone by now would have tried to sell tickets to it. Come see the end of everything. Souvenir snow globes available in the gift shop. But the real gift is stranger. No gift shop, no border, just the stretch itself. The fact that you can't fall off the map means the map keeps writing itself under your feet. And so you roll back onto your blanket of grass, more amused than anxious now. If there is no edge, then you can stop pressing against the walls. You can stop waiting for the bump, the crash, the collision. Instead, you can let yourself drift, as galaxies drift into distances that never run out. Expansion is the opposite of edges. It is the purest form of more, forever humming beneath the stars. You stretch out on your grassy field again, trying to picture what shape this expanding universe might take if you could step outside of it. Not that outside is supposed to exist, but your imagination sneaks there anyway. Shapes are friendly. Shapes are things you can sketch in the corner of a notebook while pretending to listen in class. And so your brain asks, is the universe flat, open, or closed? 3 possibilities, 3 personalities, each whispering a different story about how infinity behaves. The flat case comes first because flatness is strangely comforting. Imagine space as a boundless floor, perfectly even, stretching in every direction. No matter where you walk, you'll never loop back around. Parallel lines remain parallel, never meeting. This is the version supported by current evidence. The universe looks flat to an almost spooky degree. The mainstream historical fact. Data from the cosmic microwave background, especially the 2003 WMAP mission and later the Planck satellite, suggested that on the grandest scales, the universe is incredibly close to geometrically flat. The quirky tidbit? Close to flat is like saying your bedsheet is smooth, even though it still wrinkles where the cat needs it. Historians still argue whether our universe is exactly flat or merely so close that any curvature is too subtle for us to detect. Then there's the closed case, the Mobius strip hallway of the cosmos. Here, the universe bends back on itself. Travel far enough in one direction, and you might end up right where you started, like circumnavigating Earth without ever finding a cliff to fall off. Closed geometry has a certain cozy vibe. It means the cosmos is finite but unbounded, like living in a giant cosmic cul-de-sac. You can keep driving forever and never leave the neighbourhood, though your gas bill will look terrifying. Some ancient thinkers would have loved this version. The idea that the world wraps neatly, holding itself together like an egg. You smile, imagining medieval monks quietly nodding, if told, "Yes, Father," the stars return upon themselves like choir hymns repeating. And then there's the open case, which is a little dizzying. In this model, space curves the opposite way. It's shaped like a saddle, swooping endlessly outward. Parallel lines eventually diverge, spreading apart like tired friends who no longer return each other's calls. The universe in this version is infinite and keeps expanding forever, never looping back, never ending, always slipping beyond your grasp. If the closed model feels snug and the flat one feels familiar, the open one feels lonely. You picture yourself walking across that saddle, never circling back, just wandering further and further into a forever desert with no oases in sight. You laugh softly because picking between these shapes is like picking between mattresses at a furniture store. They all look kind of similar until you lie on them for a while. Then suddenly one is too soft, one is too firm, and one swears it's perfectly flat but makes your back ache anyway. The universe doesn't care which mattress you prefer. It picked one long ago and left us to argue about it. Still, the geometry matters, because it ties to fate. A closed universe might one day stop expanding, then collapse inward. A big crunch, galaxies rushing back together like a movie rewinding. An open universe expands forever, colder and emptier with each passing age. And a flat universe? It sits right on the razor's edge, delicately balanced, drifting outward, but always at the brink of some cosmic tipping point. Historians still argue whether dark energy has locked us permanently into the open flat side of the spectrum, or whether some new physics might tilt the scales again. As you lie there, the field beneath you feels less solid, more like a shifting surface under your fingertips. One moment it's flat carpet, the next it tilts like a globe, then it curves into a saddle. You can't choose which one to trust, and maybe that's the point. The universe isn't asking you to settle on a shape, it's asking you to live inside the question. A cricket chirps again, breaking the tension. You chuckle and think, if crickets could debate cosmology, they'd probably argue over whether the meadow is round or flat. Maybe some would insist the fence at the far end proves it's closed. Others would say, no, the chirping keeps fading because the field stretches into infinity. And maybe one stubborn cricket would announce, it's flat, folks, perfectly flat, deal with it. You suddenly feel closer to those scientists still quibbling about cosmic geometry. The universe turns us all into noisy little crickets, each chirping a different theory into the night. But as the stars shimmer above, you realise something soothing. Whether flat open or closed, you're still here, sprawled in the grass, wrapped in the same expansion as everyone else. The floor may shift under your feet, the hallway may loop or diverge, but the song remains. The distance is growing, horizons slipping, galaxies sliding ever farther away. And maybe the shape of it all isn't the lullaby, it's just the background hum. The real lullaby is the expansion itself, steady, unhurried, infinity in its patience. You close your eyes again, letting the cricket song fade and drift backward, not through galaxies this time, but through history. Before satellites measured microwaves, before telescopes spotted redshifts, before Einstein scribbled his equations, there were philosophers grappling with a simpler yet sharper riddle. What does it mean for nothing to exist? You find yourself wandering a marble courtyard in ancient Athens, stone columns gleaming in the Mediterranean sun. The air smells faintly of olive oil and dust. Around you, voices debate in smooth syllables, the kind that sound equally wise, whether they're asking about the cosmos or just arguing who owes money for lunch. Aristotle stands at the centre, gesturing with calm authority. For him, the void, the idea of empty space, was impossible. Nature, he said, abhors a vacuum. Everything must be filled with something. Air, ether, matter, fire. It doesn't matter what, but something must always occupy every place. You smirk because if Aristotle had ever tried to use a vacuum cleaner, he would have fainted on the spot. A mainstream historical fact, his rejection of nothingness shaped Western thought for nearly 2 millennia, cementing the idea that emptiness was not only unnatural, but dangerous to imagine. Nearby, though, the atomists, Democritus and his followers, argue otherwise. They insist the universe is built of indivisible atoms moving in the void. Without the void, motion itself would be impossible. Their vision is eerily close to what modern science believes, particles dancing through empty space. But quirky tidbit, Democritus described atoms as having hooks and barbs, tiny mechanical features to explain how they clung together, like a cosmic set of Lego bricks. Historians still argue whether the atomists were proto-scientists or just clever poets, inventing metaphors that happen to sound prophetic centuries later. You wander through the courtyard, watching these debates bounce off the stone walls. For some, the void was terrifying, a kind of cosmic abyss that threatened to swallow meaning itself. For others, it was liberating, a stage for motion, creation and life. You imagine trying to explain to them that the modern universe isn't expanding into anything, that it simply creates new space as it grows. Aristotle would probably scowl and call it abominable. Democritus might grin, saying, so the void is real after all. You'd shrug and admit you're not sure, then sneak away to find some grapes. The funny part is how deeply language betrays you. Even now, when you say nothing, your brain supplies an image. Blackness, whiteness, mist, silence, but that's still something. True nothingness is so slippery, it refuses to sit still in thought. The Greeks wrestled with this too. Some imagined chaos, a kind of raw formlessness, which wasn't quite nothing but wasn't orderly either. A proto-mythical soup, waiting to be stirred. You chuckle softly because even their nothing sounded more like a kitchen recipe than a clean void. And yet, despite all their cleverness, they couldn't resolve it. Could emptiness exist? Or was it a logical trick, a hole in language masquerading as a hole in reality? Historians still argue whether Aristotle's denial of the void held back scientific progress or preserved a kind of conceptual discipline that later thinkers built upon. Either way, the question outlasted him, echoing down centuries like a ghost you can't quite dismiss. Back in your grassy field, you lie on your back and let the stars stand in for those old philosophers. Each one twinkles a different argument. Some declare there is no nothing, space is always filled with fields, particles, light. Others insist, no, nothingness must exist because without it movement is impossible. The stars argue silently, their light stretched by expansion, and you realise they don't need your verdict. They shine, they drift, they whisper paradoxes, and you drift along with them. You let yourself chuckle again. Imagining Aristotle being forced to sit through a modern physics lecture, the professor says, empty space is full of quantum fluctuations, particles popping in and out of existence. Aristotle folds his arms. That's not emptiness, that's something. And maybe he'd be right. Even our current nothing isn't truly empty. It hums, it froths, it births. Real nothing remains elusive. Perhaps the universe itself is a perpetual dodge, always offering us some version of something, no matter how far we dig. As the night deepens in your mind, you realise the ancient debate never ended. It's hidden inside our modern phrasing. What is the universe expanding into? Is there a void beyond it, a backdrop for the stage? Or is beyond a nonsense word like north of the North Pole? The Greeks argued by torchlight, we argue by telescope. Same question, same unease, stretched across millennia like the very fabric of space. You take a deep breath, the scent of olive groves fading, replaced again by damp grass and night air. You don't need to solve the riddle, you just need to let it cradle you. Nothing, something, void and fullness, it all becomes the same gentle lull, wrapping you like a blanket. And maybe that's the secret the philosophers never said out loud. Sometimes the point of these questions isn't to answer them, but to fall asleep still turning them over, dreaming in paradox. The night air in your imaginary field grows heavier, as though time itself is leaning closer, ready to tell you another story. You've already listened to Aristotle and the atomists bicker, but now the centuries turn like slow gears, and you find yourself slipping into the hushed corridors of the medieval world. Torches flicker against stone walls, candles sputter on wooden desks piled with manuscripts. Outside, bells toll in monasteries, and the night sky, unchanged but full of mystery, arches over cloisters and castles alike. Here, the question of infinity still stirs, but the language has shifted. It's no longer just about atoms and voids. It's about theology, creation, and whether the universe itself dares to have boundaries. You walk into a vaulted library where monks scratch ink across parchment. Their robes rustle, and their voices murmur prayers, even as they sketch diagrams of the cosmos. The dominant belief? A finite, divinely created universe with Earth at the centre. The stars and planets were embedded in crystalline spheres, nested like layers of an onion. Beyond the final sphere lay heaven, angels, and God himself. To most, this wasn't speculation. It was certainty. Expansion, infinity, and endless void weren't just unscientific, they bordered on heresy. The mainstream historical fact: in the 13th century, Thomas Aquinas explicitly argued against an infinite universe, insisting creation was deliberate, bounded, and ordered, a reflection of divine will, but not everyone whispered the same tune. Some thinkers began to toy with dangerous possibilities. A quirky tidbit: in the 14th century, the philosopher Nicole Oresme suggested that infinite space might exist, even though it clashed with church orthodoxy. He framed it carefully, almost like a thought experiment, as though slipping contraband ideas between the lines of a holy text. Historians still argue whether he truly believed in an infinite cosmos, or was merely poking at intellectual boundaries, testing how far one could push without being branded a heretic. You wander deeper into the cloister, past monks dozing at their desks, and overhear another debate. Could God have created multiple worlds, not just one? For most, the idea was scandalous. One universe was enough. But whispers of plurality began to creep in. What if God's power wasn't limited to a single creation? What if the stars were not lamps fixed to spheres, but suns like ours, each surrounded by their own planets? Such speculation was risky, yet oddly irresistible. To imagine more than one world was to imagine an infinite God flexing his creative muscles. You smile, realizing that this is where modern questions about multiverses and expansion find their ancestors. Not in telescopes, but in whispered prayers under candlelight. The fear of infinity lingered, though. For the medieval mind, endlessness was unsettling. It broke the neat symmetry of creation. It threatened to unravel the comforting picture of a universe designed like a cathedral. Orderly, finite, full of meaning. A boundless universe would be harder to control, harder to moralize, harder to fit into sermons. Infinity was too wild, too unruly, like a fire that couldn't be contained. So expansion into nothing wasn't just an abstract puzzle. It was a theological landmine. If the universe could keep going, what role did boundaries play? And if there were no boundaries, where exactly was heaven located? You sit quietly in a pew, letting the candle smoke curl around you. The debate feels distant, yet familiar. People then, as now, wanted limits, edges, walls. Even if those walls were crystalline, transparent and studded with stars, they still gave comfort. They kept everything in place. Without them, the mind felt adrift, spinning in a void too large to comprehend. You lean your head back against the stone, thinking of how similar that is to your own instinct to imagine edges. We're not so different from the monks after all, just less comfortable in robes. Outside, the stars blaze cold and clear, the same stars those medieval scholars studied. You imagine them looking up, seeing constellations as divine patterns. Expansion was not part of their vocabulary. To them, the heavens were steady, unchanging, eternal. Yet here you are, centuries later, knowing those stars are racing away from each other, stretched apart by invisible forces. Historians still argue whether medieval debates about infinity helped pave the way for modern cosmology or merely delayed it, trapping thought in theological cages until the Renaissance cracked the locks. You return to your grassy field at last, shaking off the scent of candles and parchment. The night feels lighter now, though the stars above still twinkle with the same age-old questions. Were the monks wrong to fear infinity? Maybe not. Infinity is still overwhelming. Expansion into itself is still baffling. Nothingness is still impossible to picture. But you realize something. Each era wrestled with the same unease, just dressed in different metaphors. Greeks saw chaos, monks saw divine order, and you see galaxies receding into a horizon you'll never touch. different languages, same restless heart. And as you exhale, the paradox itself feels almost holy. Expansion into nothing, infinity without edges, a universe that refuses to stop. Maybe the monks were right in one sense. Awe is the only fitting response. Not certainty, not neat diagrams, just awe. And in that awe, your eyelids grow heavier, and the stars blur softly above you, their arguments fading into lullabies. The candles of the cloister flicker away, and you blink back into your grassy field, the sky stretched wide above you. But now the air feels charged, as if someone has tugged a great invisible sheet beneath the stars. The medieval whispers of spheres and angels fade, replaced by a quiet hum of mathematics. It's the 20th century, and a man with dishevelled hair and patient eyes is scribbling lines that will bend your imagination forever. You watch Einstein at his desk, pencil scratching furiously, equations spilling across paper, as though space itself were unfolding under his hand. He isn't picturing crystalline spheres, he's picturing fabric. That's what general relativity gave the world. Space and time bound together into a pliable cloth able to bend, stretch, and ripple. No longer a stage upon which events unfold, but an actor itself, part of the drama, constantly shifting with mass and energy. The mainstream historical fact. In 1915, Einstein presented his field equations, turning the universe into geometry. Suddenly, planets didn't orbit the sun because of invisible forces tugging them. They rolled along curves in space-time like marbles spiraling on a warped trampoline, the quirky tidbit. Einstein first added a cosmological constant to his equations to keep the universe static, because he too assumed it wasn't expanding. Later, when Hubble's observations showed otherwise, he reportedly called that constant his biggest blunder, though historians still argue whether he actually used those exact words, or whether the phrase was retrofitted to him afterward. You lie back, letting your field become fabric in your mind. The stars above you no longer pinpricks on a dome but points sewn into a great quilt, stitched tight and pulled taut. You reach out with your hand and imagine pressing against it, feeling the slight give, like leaning on a tent wall. That's what gravity is, mass pushing into the cloth, creating dips and curves. Expansion, then, isn't movement through something else. It's the cloth itself being woven larger, stitch by stitch, by its own internal pattern. Einstein's vision rewrote the very terms of the outside question. If space-time is the fabric, then asking what's beyond it is like asking what's north of the North Pole. The question folds in on itself. There is no north of north, no beyond space-time. Expansion isn't into anything, it's of the fabric itself. You exhale, because while this should feel satisfying, it only deepens the paradox. Your brain still wants to press against a wall, find the seam, peek beyond. But Einstein gently shakes his head. The fabric is all there is. Beyond it, the words beyond stop making sense. You roll onto your side and grin, because even Einstein wasn't immune to doubts. When the Russian mathematician Alexander Friedman showed that Einstein's equations allowed for a dynamic universe, one that could expand or contract, Einstein dismissed it at first. Only later, with evidence, did he concede. You imagine him sighing heavily, muttering in German about stubborn math, and then adjusting his equations. Historians still argue whether Einstein ever fully embraced the strangeness of expansion, or whether he tolerated it like an eccentric houseguest who refused to leave. But the elegance of the fabric metaphor remains. You picture space-time as a trampoline, planets as bowling balls making dips, light as marbles rolling along the curved surface. Expansion is the trampoline stretching, the fabric itself growing. The bowling balls move apart not because they're rolling anywhere, but because the very surface beneath them is spreading. And yet you laugh softly, because in real life trampolines need springs and frames. Space-time doesn't. It has no supports, no basement, no air around it. It simply is. Trampoline with no legs, floating forever. The weirdest playground equipment imaginable. In the field, the night feels quieter now, as though the stars themselves have adopted Einstein's fabric silence. No angels pushing spheres, no edges to bump into, just geometry, patient and relentless. You let yourself imagine lying on that cosmic cloth, cradled in its curves, rising and falling with the expansion. It's not that the universe is going anywhere, it's that the quilt itself is stretching, carrying you with it. You smirk at the thought of trying to explain this to Aristotle or Aquinas. It's not expanding into anything, you'd say. It's the fabric itself growing. Aristotle would scoff. Aquinas might frown, but Einstein would sit quietly, maybe smile, and then remind you not to take metaphors too literally. The fabric isn't cloth. It isn't a trampoline. It's math. Curved, relentless math. And maybe that's the strangest comfort of all. That the universe doesn't expand into chaos, but into equations. You pull your blanket tighter. The grass cool beneath you and let the quilt of stars above become literal in your mind. Expansion continues, not into emptiness, not into mystery beyond, but into itself, as it always has. The edges you crave dissolve again, leaving only fabric, endless, seamless, softly humming with the weight of galaxies. The quilt of space-time ripples softly in your imagination, but as you sink deeper into the night, a new whisper joins the fabric. Something unseen, silent, but insistent. If Einstein gave you the cloth, then dark energy is the invisible tailor, tugging at the seams, pulling galaxies apart faster and faster. You shiver slightly under your blanket in the grassy field, because this part of the story isn't just odd, it's downright eerie. Expansion alone was strange enough, but acceleration? That feels like the universe is running away from itself. Here's the mainstream historical fact. In 1998, two independent teams studying distant supernovae discovered that the universe's expansion wasn't slowing down as everyone expected, it was speeding up. Those faint explosions, acting like cosmic mile markers, revealed galaxies fleeing faster the farther away they were. This shocking result earned the researchers a Nobel Prize in 2011. The quirky tidbit? Some astronomers were so skeptical at first that they joked the teams must have measured their telescopes wrong, as though a misplaced lens cap could explain cosmic acceleration. Historians still argue whether this discovery should be compared to the Copernican revolution in terms of how drastically it rewrote our place in the cosmos. You lie back and imagine dark energy as a pressureless, invisible mist is what fills every corner of space, pushing galaxies apart. But then you laugh, because that makes it sound almost cozy, like a gentle vaporizer running in your room. In reality, it's more baffling than comforting. Dark energy doesn't behave like anything familiar. It doesn't clump, doesn't glow, doesn't interact with matter in any direct way. It just pushes. Or perhaps more accurately, it stretches space-time itself, amplifying the expansion in a way that leaves scientists shrugging. If the universe were a loaf of bread, dark energy would be the yeast on steroids, swelling the dough so quickly the baker can't keep up. You let your mind wander. What is dark energy? No one knows. Some call it the cosmological constant, Einstein once added, resurrected from the wastebasket. Others think it might be a dynamic field, slowly changing over time. A few even whisper that maybe our understanding of gravity itself is incomplete, that dark energy is just a placeholder for a deeper mistake. You imagine a group of physicists arguing at a conference, their coffee cups trembling as they wave equations around. One mutters, "It's vacuum energy," another snaps, "No, it's quintessence." A third sighs, "Maybe the universe just hates us." Historians still argue whether dark energy will turn out to be a genuine physical substance or just a symptom of our ignorance. The field around you grows very still as you picture the future written by this force. Galaxies rushing apart, stars drifting into invisibility, cosmic islands cut off from each other. Dark energy is like a quiet thief, stilling the possibility of seeing the whole universe. Tonight you can gaze at billions of galaxies in principle, though most are too faint for your eyes. But trillions of years from now, even with the best telescopes, night skies may look barren. Expansion will have stretched the light away, carried the galaxies beyond every horizon. The universe, generous now, will eventually close the curtains on its grandeur. And yet, there's something calming in the inevitability. You can't fight dark energy, you can't bottle it, can't switch it off. You're simply carried along like a leaf drifting on an endless river. You remember a joke, asking what is dark energy is like asking your cat why it knocked over the lamp. The cat just stares back, inscrutable, unbothered. The universe offers the same stare. It doesn't care that you don't understand, it just expands. Lying in the grass, you let the acceleration seep into your bones. You imagine your cells, your atoms, your very molecules gently rocked by the stretching of space. Locally, you don't feel it. Gravity keeps you intact. But on the largest scales, galaxies are already sliding faster. Their departures hastened by an invisible hand. The night hums with it, like a barely audible note resonating through the stars. You close your eyes and think, maybe dark energy isn't frightening. Maybe it's just the universe breathing deeper than we can imagine, sighing itself wider with every passing moment. You chuckle once more, picturing future astronomers billions of years from now, scratching their heads under barren skies. They'll wonder if their cosmos ever had neighbours, if the emptiness has always been so complete. Maybe they'll invent myths about a time when countless galaxies sparkled overhead. They won't know that dark energy erased their view, and you lying here tonight feel oddly lucky to live in this fleeting moment of cosmic abundance when the stars still whisper their secrets before the silence swallows them. You breathe in the cool night air, the thought of dark energy still humming in the back of your mind, but another realization rises to the surface. No matter how much the universe stretches, you'll never see it all. Your eyes can only reach so far, even with the help of the biggest telescopes ever built. Out there, beyond your sight, lies the unseeable, the unreachable. Astronomers call it the observable universe, a bubble centered on you, about 46 billion light years in radius. But don't let that number trick you. The universe itself may be much bigger, possibly infinite, but you're stuck inside this glowing snow globe of visibility. Here's the mainstream historical fact. The observable universe was first sketched out in the mid-20th century when scientists connected the dots between the finite speed of light and the finite age of the cosmos. If the universe is about 13.8 billion years old, light from farther away simply hasn't had time to arrive. The quirky tidbit? The number isn't 13.8 billion light years across, but much larger, because while the light was travelling toward us, space itself kept expanding, stretching those distances into 46 billion light years. Historians still argue whether calling this boundary a horizon is misleading, since it sounds like you might eventually reach it if you just keep walking, when in fact it's receding faster than you could ever chase. You let that sink in. You're sitting in a cosmic bubble, private sphere of visibility, unique to you. Someone standing on another planet in a faraway galaxy would have their own bubble, overlapping partly with yours but not exactly the same. It's a strangely intimate thought. Every conscious creature, anywhere in the cosmos, lives inside their own glowing globe of knowable stars. Expansion doesn't just scatter galaxies, it personalizes horizons. You gaze upward, imagining the edge of your bubble. It's not a hard wall, not a shimmering shell you could touch. It's simply the limit of information. Light beyond that edge hasn't reached you yet, and in many cases, it never will. You wonder what lies outside. More galaxies, more void, something entirely different, something your words can't wrap around. You smirk, like a goldfish in a bowl, wondering if there's a living room beyond the glass. Except here, there's no glass, no water, no living room, just the faint hum of unreachable distance. Still, it feels playful to imagine pressing your hand against that horizon, as though it were a soap bubble trembling at your touch. Would it wobble? Would it pop? Or would your hand simply sink into lightless infinity? You roll over in the grass and laugh quietly at yourself. The horizon isn't really there, it's an artifact of speed and time, but your imagination insists on turning it into a boundary because brains love walls, even illusory ones. You remember a story. In the 1920s, some astronomers thought the Milky Way might be the whole universe, a little island into darkness. Then telescopes revealed other galaxies, and suddenly the universe grew unimaginably bigger. Now, almost a century later, the same trick repeats. What we can see may only be a tiny slice, a glowing pearl on a chain that extends beyond forever. Historians still argue whether humans will ever develop a method to peek beyond the observable horizon, or whether it's an eternal blindfold. The thought should feel claustrophobic, but instead it soothes you. There's comfort in knowing you don't need to solve it. Your horizon is simply the limit of what your body and tools allow. The universe is bigger, stranger, richer than you can ever witness. And that's fine. Like reading a book you know you'll never finish, the beauty lies in turning the pages you can reach, not in demanding to read the final sentence. A breeze ripples across your imaginary field, and you feel the edges of your bubble shimmering around you. Galaxies drift at its boundary, stretched red and faint. Beyond them, silence. Beyond them, maybe more bubbles, maybe infinity. Your horizon isn't a prison. It's a window, a temporary glowing circle of vision that shrinks, stretches, and shifts as the universe sings its expansion song. And in that thought you settle. The bubble hums, the stars flicker, and you smile at the irony. The universe doesn't expand into anything, but your imagination always does. It spills past the horizon, sketches monsters and miracles, and fills the void with questions. Expansion writes the laws, but you supply the myths. You lie still in your grassy field, staring at the bubble of your observable universe, and suddenly your thoughts pop like champagne corks. If the cosmos is inflating, accelerating, and finite to your eyes, maybe it isn't alone. Maybe the universe you see is just one bubble fizzing in a vast cosmic bottle, alongside countless others you'll never touch. The word slips in quietly, multiverse, and you sigh, because here the mystery doesn't shrink, it multiplies. The mainstream historical fact, the idea of multiple universes, has roots as far back as the 1950s, when physicist Hugh Everett proposed the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Every possible outcome of a quantum event branches into its own reality. But in cosmology, the concept bloomed from inflation theory in the 80s, when Alan Guth and others suggested that inflation might never end, creating endless bubble universes sprouting like foam. The quirky tidbit. Some physicists jokingly called it eternal inflation, not because it sounded elegant, but because it gave them headaches at conferences. Historians still argue whether the multiverse is science or just well-dressed speculation, since by definition, other universes may be forever unreachable. You picture it anyway, an endless sea of bubbles, each one sealed off from the others, each with its own physics. Some bubbles might fizz with galaxies like ours, others might collapse in an instant, others might stretch with bizarre laws, stars made of ice, gravity that pushes instead of pulls, time running backward like a movie rewinding itself. You laugh softly, because if that's true, then somewhere there's a universe where you never forgot your middle school locker combination, and another where you became a professional accordion player. A comforting, if slightly ridiculous thought. Still, your bubble feels lonely. You imagine drifting to its edge, watching the shimmering soap film of your horizon, and wondering if another bubble presses faintly against it. Could collisions happen? Some theories suggest yes. Bubble universes bumping might leave scars on the cosmic microwave background. Faint rings or distortions that astronomers could, in principle, detect. Others dismiss this as wishful thinking, like searching for fingerprints on a fogged mirror. Historians still argue whether the faint anomalies we have seen are genuine evidence or just noise masquerading as signal. But your imagination won't let go. You see yourself floating among the bubbles, champagne glass in hand, as each cosmos expands and bursts silently around you. Some pop immediately, gone before you blink. Others swell enormous, glowing faintly with their galaxies. The bottle stretches on forever, a fizzy infinity of infinities. You raise your glass and toast the absurdity. Here's to universes I'll never visit and lives I'll never lead. Back in your grassy field, the crickets chirp, grounding you again. You realise the multiverse isn't just physics, it's myth reborn. Ancient cultures told stories of countless worlds layered above and below, endless heavens, endless underworlds. The multiverse is simply the modern echo, wrapped in equations instead of chance. Humans have always loved the idea of more than one. More worlds, more stories, more chances. You smile, realising that what we call science is sometimes just myth with better math. Still, the question gnaws, if there are other universes, what lies between them? Is there a space for bubbles to fizz in? Or is that too just metaphor failing again? You chuckle at your own stubbornness, always demanding a container, always sketching the box. The bubbles don't need an outside, they may each be self-contained, floating not in space but in concept. Perhaps the champagne is only in your imagination. The night sky above seems thicker now, as if stars themselves hint at hidden neighbours you'll never meet. And yet you don't feel cheated, you feel lulled. The possibility of countless universes doesn't add noise, it adds harmony. If our cosmos is just one note, then the multiverse is the whole symphony, swelling beyond hearing. You let yourself drift, comforted by the idea that your bubble hums alongside others, even if no signal ever crosses between them. The champagne fizz fades, the bubbles recede, and you're left once more with your own horizon. Infinite or not, solitary or one of many, it stretches around you like a cradle. And as you breathe deeply, you realize, whether this universe expands into itself or into endless others, the lullaby remains the same. Growth, distance, mystery, repeat. The fizz of multiverse bubbles fades into quiet, and you're left lying once more in your field, the night sky spread out like an endless stage. The question that has followed you since the beginning returns, but softer now, like a lullaby that refuses to let go. Does outside even exist? You roll the word around in your mind as though tasting it for the first time. Outside. It makes sense when you're dealing with houses, with boxes, with picnic baskets and socks. There's inside and outside, container and contained. But when the container is everything, the word begins to wobble. Maybe it doesn't belong here at all. Language is your trusty ladder, but here the rungs begin to snap. You try to climb higher. What's beyond space? The question clangs and falls apart. To ask beyond assumes there's a place to go, a somewhere waiting to be discovered. But space isn't in anything. It isn't sitting in a room, or a tank, or a bowl of soup. It's the stage itself. Asking what's outside the universe is like asking, where does the stage sit during a play? The stage doesn't sit, it is the play. You laugh quietly because the absurdities are starting to soothe rather than frustrate you. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Philosophers and physicists alike have wrestled with this linguistic trap. In the 20th century, Arthur Eddington warned about using words like outside too casually in cosmology, arguing that they might not carry meaning in this context. The quirky tidbit. Some medieval scholars even suggested that God existed outside the universe, only to later amend their language, realizing the word carried baggage it couldn't bear. Historians still argue whether modern cosmologists are guilty of the same thing, leaning on human words that collapse under cosmic pressure. You imagine a child tugging your sleeve, pointing at the stars. What's behind them, they ask. You smile, because you know the child is just repeating the instinct all humans share, the need for an edge, a behind, a beyond. And yet, the true answer might be that the question itself is broken, like asking, what colour is Thursday, or what does the taste of silence weigh? The words fit together, but they don't reach reality. In your field you shift slightly, the grass cool against your arm, and you let the outside dissolve. It's hard, like prying your fingers open when you want to clench them. You keep imagining walls, horizons, edges, but slowly, gently you begin to release them. The sky isn't a dome, and the universe isn't a balloon in a room. It's expansion all the way down, self-contained, needing no wrapper. Like music swelling in air, it doesn't expand into silence. It simply grows louder, then softer on its own terms. The crickets hum, and you smile again. If outside doesn't exist, then maybe your restless craving for it is the real mystery. Why do humans ache for boundaries? Maybe because boundaries make stories possible. A hero crosses the edge of the known world. A ship sails beyond the map. An explorer opens a door. Without outside, stories stutter. But perhaps the universe doesn't care about stories, it just is. Expansion without container, drama without curtain. You laugh softly once more, imagining a cosmic prank. What if the universe is indeed sitting in some grander space, but that outside is forever inaccessible, and the question what's out there is just the universe's way of trolling you? Historians still argue whether there's any scientific point in speculating about outsides we can never measure, or whether it's philosophy dressed up in lab coats. And now, as your eyelids grow heavier, you realize the best answer might be no answer at all. Outside doesn't exist because the universe doesn't need it. The stage is enough. The music is enough. The expansion is enough. You exhale slowly, letting the paradox blur like stars in sleepy vision. Your field is quiet. The sky stretches endlessly, not into anything, but into itself. And with that thought, you let the word outside slip away like a leaf, drifting on the dark water, vanishing into the hum of night. The word outside has slipped away, like a leaf carried by a stream, but your thoughts refuse to stay quiet. If the universe isn't expanding into anything, if outside collapses under its own weight, then what about nothing? Not the soft metaphorical kind you've toyed with, black fog, blank canvases, empty rooms, but the scientific kind, the kind physicists dare to call vacuum. You close your eyes and lean deeper into your field of grass, imagining the soil and air beneath you thinning, until there's not even a single atom left. Silence, stillness. You've reached the void, and just when you think you've finally touched real nothing, pop! A particle appears out of nowhere, then vanishes again. The silence crackles, refusing to stay silent. This is quantum foam, the restless bedrock of reality. The mainstream historical fact. In the 1940s, physicists Paul Dirac and later Richard Feynman developed the framework of quantum field theory, which suggested that even the vacuum isn't truly empty. Fields ripple even in their lowest energy state, producing virtual particles that flicker into existence and annihilate almost immediately. The quirky tidbit: some scientists have said that the vacuum is like a boiling pot with bubbles popping in and out, while others compare it to cosmic soda fizz. Historians still argue whether these particles are real in any meaningful sense, or simply mathematical phantoms that help the equations work. You picture yourself floating in this foam, not water but jittering possibility, a sea of appearances and disappearances. It's almost comical. Here you were, desperate to find nothingness, and instead you stumbled into the busiest nightclub in physics. Particles flashing in and out, photons buzzing like neon lights, energy dancing in ways that refuse to be still. You chuckle softly. Even nothing throws a party, it seems. The foam isn't just a curiosity, though. It has teeth. Quantum fluctuations during inflation are thought to have seeded the structure of the universe, the galaxies, stars, and the planets that now glitter overhead. Without the jitter of nothing, there'd be no something. The grand tapestry of space began as tiny ripples in the foam, magnified by inflation's furious stretch. You smile, because it's deliciously ironic. Everything you see, every galaxy and blade of grass, may be the child of what you'd once have called nothing. You roll onto your side in the field, imagining a physicist explaining this to Aristotle. Even empty space isn't empty, it buzzes. Aristotle would shake his head. Then it isn't empty. And maybe he'd be right. Our nothing is a cheater, a trickster. It isn't sense, it's a whisper too faint to hear. Maybe true nothing, the pure absence you keep trying to picture, doesn't exist at all. Maybe the universe refuses to allow it, filling every crevice with at least a hum, a flicker, a chance. Historians still argue whether this means absolute nothingness is impossible, or whether we simply lack the tools to perceive it. Your thoughts drift toward black holes, those cosmic pranksters. Some theories suggest their event horizons leak information via Hawking radiation, a process tied directly to vacuum fluctuations at the edge. Even black holes, the ultimate something, depend on the froth of nothing to decide their fate. You grin, because it seems the universe won't let you escape the joke. Nothing is always something in disguise. The field grows cooler, and you imagine the foam itself as your mattress, restless, bubbling soft beneath you. It doesn't creak like springs or sigh like down feathers. It fizzles, flickers, whispers, a bed of quantum sparks. You laugh softly, not exactly ideal for sleep, but comforting in its own way. If the universe expands into anything, maybe it's into this jittering potential, a floor that never lies flat, always buzzing with possibility. You exhale, letting the thoughts slow. Perhaps nothing isn't the enemy after all. Perhaps it's the womb of everything, a fertile silence that can't help but hum. You stop demanding true emptiness and let the fizzing vacuum lull you. A glass of soda fizzing endlessly at your bedside. Even here, at the supposed bottom of being, there's no outside, no stillness, only a restless sea cradling stars. The fizzing vacuum softens beneath you, and for a moment you almost drift away entirely. But then your thoughts slide toward the horizon, not the observable bubble you traced earlier, but the horizon of time itself. If the universe is expanding, if dark energy is stretching it faster, and if quantum foam is forever jittering underfoot, what does the future look like? You turn your gaze upward again, stars twinkling like scattered embers, and let the possibilities flicker. Not all endings are the same, and the universe, annoyingly indecisive, seems to be auditioning several. The mainstream historical fact. Cosmologists have proposed multiple scenarios depending on the exact balance of dark energy, matter, and cosmic geometry. A closed universe could collapse back on itself in a big crunch. An eternally accelerating universe could fade into a heat death. And in certain models, dark energy could tear everything apart in a catastrophic big rip. The quirky tidbit, some theorists half-jokingly call the heat death the cosmic retirement plan, because it ends not with a bang but with galaxies lounging around at absolute zero. Historians still argue whether any of these futures is inevitable, since new physics could still rewrite the script. You picture the heat death first because it feels the most ironic. The stars burn out one by one, galaxies drift beyond each other's horizons, and eventually only black holes remain, radiating their slow trickle of Hawking evaporation. Time itself becomes sluggish, stretched across a barren stage. The universe doesn't crash, it yawns. Like a party that went on too long, the music fades, the balloons sag, the snacks are still, and finally everyone goes home. It's not terrifying, just lonely. You chuckle, imagining the last proton sighing, "Well, that's that," before dissolving. Then the big crunch takes its turn. In this vision, expansion slows, halts, and reverses. Galaxies don't drift away, they tumble back together. The quilt of space-time folds inward, tighter and tighter, until everything collapses into a single searing point. It's dramatic, cinematic, worthy of a final scene with booming music. Some even suggest a crunch might birth another big bang, a cyclical universe pulsing forever. You grin at the idea of cosmic recycling, stars and galaxies composted into fresh universes, like a gardener endlessly turning soil. Historians still argue whether any evidence truly points toward this, or whether it's just our love for stories with neat loops. And then comes the big rip, the most theatrical of all. Here, dark energy doesn't just stretch space gently. It accelerates like a maniac, pulling galaxies apart, then stars, then planets, then atoms themselves. Eventually, even quarks are torn from each other, the ultimate disassembly. You can't help but laugh nervously at this one. It feels like the universe losing its patience, muttering, "Fine, if you can't stop asking what I'm expanding into, I'll just expand everything into shreds." The rip is both terrifying and absurd, like watching someone overinflate a balloon until even the rubber atoms give up. Which fate awaits, no one knows. Observations suggest we're on track for heat death or maybe the rip, but certainty is elusive. You roll in the grass and imagine each outcome as a dream sequence. In one, you drift forever into silence, stars fading like candles. In another, you're swept into a fiery implosion, the field around you folding into light. And in the most outrageous, you feel your own atoms stretch until even your thoughts unravel. Not exactly spa day endings, but fascinating in their own bleak ways. Yet as unsettling as these futures are, they carry a strange peace. The universe doesn't need happy endings, it doesn't need applause, it only needs to keep writing itself, whether in a long slow fade or a fiery encore. You breathe deeply, the grass cool under your fingers, and realise that for you, the story ends much sooner anyway. Humanity's chapter is a blink, a footnote compared to these grand finales. Maybe that's comforting. You won't live long enough to see the last proton sigh or the final black hole blink out. You only need to enjoy the show while it lasts. The stars above shimmer a little dimmer now in your imagination, as if rehearsing their eventual exits, and you find yourself smiling. The universe might not expand into anything, but it certainly expands into futures, different, uncertain, endlessly debated. And whether it ends in heat, crunch or rip, tonight it still glows, still hums, still sings, and that's enough to lull you, at least for now, into quiet wonder. The futures fade like smoke, leaving you lying once more on your grassy field staring at a sky that feels both endless and impossibly fragile. You've walked through heat deaths, crunches and rips, but now a different thought drifts into your mind. What if the whole picture of space itself is wrong? What if the universe doesn't expand into anything because, well, in a deep and disorienting sense, there isn't a space to expand? You roll onto your back, close your eyes, and imagine reality itself peeling away like wallpaper. What if everything you see, stars, galaxies, the whole shimmering quilt, isn't the thing but the projection of the thing to... This is the whisper of the holographic principle. The mainstream historical fact. In the 1990s, physicists Gerard 't Hooft and Leonard Susskind proposed the holographic idea, inspired partly by earlier work on black hole thermodynamics by Jacob Bekenstein and Stephen Hawking. They noticed that a black hole's information content wasn't proportional to its volume but to its surface area. The quirky tidbit. Some researchers half joked that the universe might be like a cosmic DVD. everything you experience encoded on a two-dimensional surface, playing out as a three-dimensional illusion. Historians still argue whether the holographic principle is a mathematical convenience, a deep truth, or simply a metaphor we've mistaken for reality. You sit up in your imaginary field and picture the stars above you flattening. Not vanishing, flattening. The constellations become etchings on a surface like carvings on an enormous dome. The galaxies shrink into encoded bits, like pixels on a cosmic screen. The depth you thought was infinite might just be clever projection, like a planetarium's night sky sprayed across the ceiling. You chuckle nervously because the thought makes you feel like an extra in a simulation. Except here the projector isn't a computer, it's physics itself, and yet the metaphor doesn't kill the wonder. A hologram is still dazzling after all. Walk around a holographic card and the image shifts, tricking your eyes into seeing depth where none exists. The holographic principle says our universe might be doing the same, pulling off a magic trick so seamless you never question it. The joke lands. Maybe the universe isn't expanding into anything because it doesn't need to. The expansion is just the projection of a deeper pattern, flickering beyond your perception. You roll onto your side and smirk. Imagine telling Aristotle this: the universe is a hologram. He'd probably declare you drunk. Even Einstein might raise an eyebrow. But to modern physicists, the idea isn't pure fantasy, it's supported by equations. In string theory and quantum gravity, holography offers a way to reconcile the rules, to stitch together the fabric of space-time without needing an outside. It doesn't say you're trapped in an illusion, it says the illusion is the most real thing there is. Historians still argue whether this counts as an explanation or just another metaphor with shinier math. The stars above twinkle, and you imagine them as data points, glowing pixels on a cosmic disk. Expansion becomes easier to accept in this light. It's not space stretching into nothing, it's information rearranging itself. Like watching a video zoom out, the image enlarges without needing a canvas behind it. The projection grows because the code says so, that's all. You lie back, arms behind your head, and exhale slowly. If reality is holographic, then your grassy field, your cricket chorus, even the breeze that brushes your cheek, all of it is written on some unfathomable surface projected here for you to experience. Does that make it less real? You laugh, not at all, if your senses believe it. If your memories hold it, if your heart swells under the stars, then the hologram is real enough. The night feels gentler now. The urge to demand an outside, a container, a where for expansion to go seems almost quaint. If the holographic principle holds, then space isn't in anything. It's the language of reality itself, written in shimmering code. Expansion isn't a balloon swelling or dough rising. It's the unfolding of the script, the flicker of the film. You close your eyes and imagine yourself as a character in a movie, aware for just a moment that the film reel exists, then surrendering to the story anyway. And maybe that's the lullaby here. You don't need to solve whether you're hologram or matter, projection or depth. You only need to let the expansion carry you. The pixels hum around you, the story play on. Whether it's a hologram or not, it's the only night sky you'll ever need. The holographic night sky still shimmers above you, its stars now half imagined as glowing pixels on some hidden cosmic screen. But after a while, the projection talk quiets, and you return to a more ordinary human discomfort. Why can't you stop demanding an edge? You chuckle to yourself, brushing your hand over the cool blades of grass. Because the need is almost childish. You want the world to be like a house. You're either inside or outside. The walls are solid and there's a door to knock on. Yet every time cosmology tries to answer, the walls vanish, the door dissolves, and you're left holding the knob of a house that doesn't exist. The mainstream historical fact, philosophers from Kant to Wittgenstein pointed out that human categories of thought, space, time, causation, might be limited tools, useful in everyday life but clumsy when applied to the whole cosmos. The quirky tidbit. Kant supposedly paced so predictably on his daily walks in Königsberg that neighbours set their clocks by him. Ironic, considering he argued time itself might only be a construct of human perception. Historians still argue whether philosophy helps physics clarify these limits or simply muddies the water with word games. You roll over, facing the horizon, and wonder if the real boundary isn't out there in the stars but in here, inside your head. Maybe the universe doesn't expand into anything because the very question is shaped by the way your brain evolved. brains built for chasing prey, building huts, and arguing over who forgot to stir the stew. Brains that need fences and borders because survival depends on them. Inside the firelight's safe, outside, danger. The instinct has never left. You smile wryly, your neurons crave walls, even when the cosmos refuses to supply them. This craving spills into every field. You think of maps drawn with neat outlines, of stories framed by beginnings and endings, of sports confined to courts and fields. Humans like boundaries because they make life comprehensible. Yet the universe is under no obligation to satisfy this craving. Expansion without an outside, Europe without edges. It's like a cosmic prank reminding you that your categories are too small. You laugh softly, Ishiate, because if the universe has a sense of humour, this is probably its favourite joke, watching billions of humans try to imagine nothing and failing every time. But the discomfort is real. You sit up in your field, hug your knees, and picture yourself standing at the edge of existence, palms pressed against something unyielding. Without that fantasy, you feel adrift. And isn't that exactly what fuels philosophy? The unease that refuses to settle. Historians still argue whether humans will ever stop asking what's outside, or whether it's wired into our storytelling DNA, as inevitable as lullabies and ghost stories. You close your eyes again, and the thought reshapes itself into something gentler. Maybe the craving for edges isn't a mistake. Maybe it's a compass. Not a literal pointer to an outside, but a reminder that curiosity itself is boundless. The edge you long for is metaphorical, the line between what you know and what you don't. Expansion isn't into space, it's into your own ignorance, and that's not frightening, it's a lullaby disguised as a riddle. A cricket chirps close to your ear, startling you back to the field. You grin because it's a perfect reminder. To the cricket, the world is the grass and the air, bounded by sound. The cricket doesn't wonder what lies beyond galaxies. Its horizon is small but sufficient. You too are just a creature with a horizon. Perhaps demanding an outside is noble, but perhaps it's just a fancy cricket song, louder but not so different. You stretch out again, arms wide, letting the stars blanket you. You may never stop asking for edges, walls and containers, but maybe the secret is to stop expecting an answer. The ache itself is the gift, the question itself the comfort. The universe doesn't expand into anything, and you may never stop trying to picture it. That's okay. The paradox isn't a puzzle to solve, it's a pillow to rest your mind on. The pillow of paradox cradles you, but your mind, stubborn as ever, drifts sideways into stories, not the equations of physicists or the riddles of philosophers, but the myths humans have always spun when faced with the unseeable. You imagine yourself shrinking into an ancient map, parchment unrolling beneath your fingers, inked coastlines curling around the edge of the known. At the margins, beasts, serpents, and curling words, here be dragons. For thousands of years, people couldn't stand blank spaces, so they filled them with creatures, gods, or cosmic shells. Maybe you realise that instinct is exactly the same one that makes you demand an edge to the universe today. The mainstream historical fact, Babylonian cosmology pictured the world as a flat disk surrounded by an ocean, covered by a dome, with the heavens above and the underworld below, the quirky tidbit. In Hindu tradition, one popular image described the earth resting on the back of a giant turtle, which itself floated on an infinite sea. Historians still argue whether such images were meant literally or metaphorically, though the line between myth and metaphor was thinner back then than it is now. You chuckle, picturing yourself walking to the universe's edge only to find a turtle blinking back at you. Expanding into nothing? No, it would say. Expanding onto my shell. You can't decide if that's more terrifying or more comforting. At least a turtle gives you something solid to imagine. The Greeks too couldn't resist boundaries. Their cosmos was an ordered sphere, the earth nestled in the middle, stars embedded like jewels in crystalline shells. Beyond those shells, chaos. Not the messy desk kind of chaos, but a primordial, formless expanse. To step past the stars was to step into the unshaped, the unnameable. And in that sense, their mythic edge wasn't so different from your own uneasy outside. The words shift across centuries, but the yearning is the same. You let the myths wash over you, and soon you're drifting among cosmic eggs. In Egyptian lore, the sun itself was born from one, In Orphic tradition, the universe cracked open from an egg of silver. The egg is a comforting boundary, finite, round, protective. You can picture it in your hand, smooth and weighty. An egg doesn't expand into anything. It simply hatches, spilling life from within. You smile. If only the universe would adopt that metaphor for you. No edges, no outside, just a shell giving way to growth. And then, of course, there are the endless seas. Countless cultures imagined the world floating in water. Polynesian myths tell of creation rising from the ocean's womb. Norse stories speak of Ymir's body giving shape to the cosmos, while surrounding waters held it all in place. Even Genesis describes the waters above and the waters below, with firmament stretched between. Humans always gave the universe a boundary, even if it was liquid, shimmering, dangerous. Water was comforting because it was familiar, you knew what it was to float. Expansion into nothingness? Much harder to swallow. Historians still argue whether these myths reveal ignorance or imagination, maybe both. But lying in your field, you see the continuity. Just as cartographers filled their map margins with dragons, modern scientists fill the gaps of their knowledge with equations, constants, and placeholder words like dark energy, different symbols, same hunger. No one tolerates blankness for long. You laugh softly, imagining a cosmic mashup, the universe expanding outward, carried on a turtle's back, cracking from an egg, while dragons swirl at the edges to keep things lively. It's absurd, but no more absurd than trying to picture nothing. Maybe mythmakers weren't wrong. They just admitted sooner that the human mind needs pictures, however fanciful, to soothe the blank. Back in your grassy field, the myths drift away, leaving you under the modern stars. But you don't feel superior to those ancients, you feel kinship. Their domes, eggs, and turtles were lullabies, just like your metaphors of balloons and bread. None of them answer the riddle, but all of them make it livable. And maybe that's what myths were always for, not to solve the void, but to make it bearable enough to sleep beneath. The myths fade like dream smoke, leaving you once more in your field. Grass cool against your skin, stars scattered across the sky. You've wandered through eggs and turtles, domes and seas, but now your thoughts tiptoe back to the present, the age of telescopes, satellites, particle colliders, and chalkboards covered with symbols only a handful of humans can read. And even here, with all our data and all our equations, the question still echoes. What is the universe expanding into? You roll onto your back and listen, as if the crickets themselves are holding a late-night debate on behalf of humanity. The mainstream historical fact. Modern cosmologists rely on general relativity and observational evidence, like the redshift of galaxies and the cosmic microwave background, to argue that the universe doesn't need an outside, the quirky tidbit. When the 2015 BICEP 2 experiment initially claimed to have detected primordial gravitational waves, potential echoes of inflation, it was hailed as proof of cosmic expansion models, until it turned out most of the signal came from plain old galactic dust. Historians still argue whether this was a triumph of science correcting itself or an embarrassing stumble that shows just how fragile our interpretations remain. You grin at the thought. Even now, with satellites orbiting Earth and detectors buried deep in Antarctic ice, we're still squinting at faint signals, trying to decide whether they mean inflation or dust. It's both humbling and hilarious. Imagine telling an ancient scribe, "We've replaced your dragons with data. But don't worry, we're just as confused as you were." And the debates rage on. Some physicists say the universe expands into nothing because nothing else exists. Others argue the multiverse picture is too tempting to ignore, that bubbles fizzing forever give us the neatest explanation for inflation's strange properties. Still others propose we've misunderstood gravity itself, that dark energy and acceleration might be signs of a deeper law waiting to be uncovered. You smile, imagining a cosmic courtroom where these theories present their cases, each armed with charts, graphs, and overly dramatic metaphors. No jury, no verdict, just endless cross-examination. Historians still argue whether we should even ask the question. What's it expanding into? Might be like asking Kyo, what's the smell of blue? A category mistake. Yet people keep asking and scientists keep answering, and round it goes. The persistence of the question itself may say more about us than about the cosmos. You laugh softly, picturing future textbooks. Maybe one day they'll explain expansion with such clarity that school children will nod calmly and never think twice about what it is. Or maybe they'll still doodle dragons in the margins because blank space demands filling. Either way, the hunger for explanation is eternal. You roll onto your side and picture conferences full of exhausted scientists sipping terrible coffee at midnight. They argue inflation, quantum fields, geometry, vacuum energy, holography. Some defend the status quo, others chase fringe ideas. A few throw up their hands and mutter that maybe we're not built to understand. Yet all of them, even in disagreement, share the same awe. Expansion into nothing is absurd, but it's also beautiful. The very act of wrestling with it turns silence into song. You let yourself relax into that thought. The debates don't need resolution to have meaning. The universe may never tell you whether there's an outside or whether outside is nonsense. But the human response, questions, equations, arguments, even born jokes, is its own kind of expansion. Our understanding grows, even if it never reaches an edge. Above you, the stars wink, as if amused. They've heard Aristotle, Aquinas, Einstein, Goethe, Susskind, and countless others argue beneath their glow. They'll keep hearing new voices long after you're gone. The debates will continue, not because answers are certain, but because asking is irresistible. And maybe that's the truest continuity. Not edges, not outsides, but the endless expansion of curiosity itself. You sigh softly, the cricket chorus returning to lull you. The field grows quiet, the stars blur, the debates go on in distant lecture halls and journals, but here, per night, they fade into background hum. You don't need a verdict, you only need the wonder. The hum of debate fades until only the field remains, cricket steady, stars patient, your body sinking deeper into the cool grass. You've wandered through expansion and edges, balloons and bubbles, monks and mathematicians, myths and holograms, each path curled back to the same mystery. If nothing lies beyond the universe, what is it expanding into? And now, at the edge of this long journey, the question lingers not as a demand, but as a lull. You realise you don't need the answer. The expansion itself is the lullaby. You gaze upward, eyelids heavy, and let yourself imagine the universe as a great breathing organism. Inhale, galaxies draw near. Exhale, they drift apart, not into a room, not into a void, but into the rhythm of their own existence. Expansion isn't a voyage, it's a heartbeat. A cosmic pulse you've been riding all along, too small to notice until now. The mainstream historical fact, the discovery of cosmic expansion in the mid-20s turned our understanding inside out, shifting us from a static universe to one that grows, the quirky tidbit. At first, Einstein resisted the idea so strongly he called it irritating, only to later accept it and marvel at its elegance. Historians still argue whether his change of heart was purely scientific or tinged with the quiet awe at how strange reality could be. You let that thought soften you. Even Einstein, the mind who reshaped space-time itself, stumbled against the same paradox. Where does it go? And maybe stumbling is the point. The question is a reminder that some mysteries aren't here to be solved, but to cradle us in wonder. In your field, you stretch out fully, arms wide as though to embrace the sky. The stars above flicker, galaxies receding in their silent dance, each one carried by the stretch of space-time itself. You don't feel smaller for not knowing. You feel lighter, as though the absence of an edge frees you, untethers you. If there's no outside, then you are always inside, always held, and always part of the infinite breath. You chuckle softly at the thought that humans will never stop asking anyway. Children will still tug sleeves, asking what's beyond the stars. Philosophers will still argue whether nothing exists. Scientists will still squint at data, debating dust versus signals. And every time the universe will give the same answer. Expansion. Not into anything, not out of anything, just expansion, humming like a song too large for words. Your eyelids grow heavy, the field blurs into shadow. The stars smear into a gentle glow. The universe keeps expanding and you drift with it, not into an edge, but into rest. And so tonight's journey settles. The cosmos does not need a container. It does not require an outside. It expands into its own mystery endeavours, seamless, unhurried, and you lying quietly beneath it can finally let go of needing more. Now the story slows, the rhythm stretching out like a final breath. The crickets in your field soften to a steady murmur. The grass beneath you no longer sharp with detail, but gentle, like fabric. Overhead, the stars blur, not vanishing, but dissolving into one another, like grains of sugar in warm water. The universe keeps expanding, yes, but at this pace you don't feel rushed. You feel carried, as if the very fabric of space-time has lowered you into a cradle. Your breathing matches the cosmos, slow, steady, unhurried. Each inhale feels like galaxies sliding gently apart. Each exhale feels like horizons slipping quietly beyond reach. Expansion no longer demands explanation. It simply accompanies you, a background hum, a quiet tide. You let your thoughts loosen. No need to chase edges, no need to demand outside. Those questions can rest now. The universe doesn't scold you for asking. It only reminds you that mystery itself can be enough, and mystery in its own way is soft. The night has deepened, the field has grown still. You are smaller than galaxies, yet folded safely inside the very expansion that confused you. There is no outside to fall into, no edges to crash against, only a widening lull, infinite in its patience. And as your body grows heavier and your eyes drift shut, you surrender to that lull. Expansion continues, galaxies drift, the horizon hums, but you are already home, held by the fabric, wrapped in the mystery, resting in the cradle of a universe that expands only into itself. Sleep comes gently like a final horizon slipping beyond sight. Sweet dreams.